Okay, thank you very much for this excellent discussion, Abha and Mridula, especially the emphasis on resilience building and the various challenges we as a society need to ponder upon. With this, we now move to a very interesting panel discussion, that is technology can drive sustainability. We have been listening to several conversations in the last 2 days, and what we have seen is that while we have great ambition and the will, the transformation or other transition, as the earlier discussion was talking about, cannot happen overnight. The ambitions can be met not just by having knowledge about technologies, but also on the availability and accessibility of these technologies to the relevant stakeholders. Mr. Kant also in his keynote highlighted the importance, and he also spoke about few technologies and how India is poised to adopt and integrate them. I think hence it is of pertinence that the closing panel also discuss or dwell on these various elements on how technology can drive sustainability. And it is my honor to also invite our eminent industry leaders here for this discussion. Let me first invite the moderator for this panel discussion, Mr. Sambitosh Mohapatra. He is the ESG platform leader India for PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you. I would also want to invite welcome. I would also want to invite our panel members, Ms. Suman Mishra, CEO, Mahindra Electric Mobility Limited. Welcome, Suman. I would also like to invite Mr. Bill Shukla, Executive Vice President and Group Business Head for Environment Business Unit, Thermax Limited. Welcome, Bill.
Hi, thank you, Anis. Thanks for the introduction.
Thank you. Let me also invite Mr. Anindya Chowdhury, Country Manager, Shell, India. Welcome, Anindya.
Thank you very much.
Let me also invite Mr. Rahul Sankhe, President and Co-founder of Sensoc. Welcome, Rahul.
Thank you, Anindya.
And let me also finally invite Mr. Sandeep Bangia, Head of EV, Tata Powers. Sandeep. Okay, well, thank you once again and welcome to all the panelists here, and over to you, Mr. Mohapatra.
Thank you, Anish, for the introduction of the panelists. Let me first of all welcome all our audience to the panel discussion. We'll also welcome Anindya, Bill, Rahul, Suman, and Sandeep. Hopefully Sandeep is joining. Anish, is he in the backstage? Okay, I don't think Anish is there. Okay, but going forward, quite a panel we've managed to congregate on a Saturday evening across the energy and transportation value chain, to be candid. Oil and gas, power and network businesses, OEMs providing technology, and an IT service provider integrating it all. So I am looking forward to a learning experience here. Hopefully you will take some things out of this panel discussion going forward. We also have legacy companies, right? The traditional Tata Power, Mahindra, Shell, along with which you also have Sensoc, one of our startups. And in between all of them, Thermax, one of the sustainability providers of many of these technologies. Just also to belabor the point, Shell has declared to become a net zero emissions energy business by 2050. Tata Power will be net zero carbon by 2050. Only last week I heard Mr. Sinha saying that he will advance it to 2045. Mahindra is a carbon neutral by 2040. And Thermax had promised in 2019 that they will reduce their carbon emission by 25% by 2024 in 5 years, right? So therefore, these are all responsible, sustainable companies managing the transition as we speak. So welcome you all. The structure of this discussion over the next 50 minutes would be a short introduction by me over the next 3-4 minutes. After that, we dwell directly into the panel discussions where we'll hear the views of panel members over the questions that will be posed to them by me. Post that, we will open it up for audience question and answers for next 5 minutes. And then we can conclude the session. So that's the structure of our session that we are planning to do. And the context is quite right in the sense, only last month India declared its net zero commitment by 2070 and reduction by the carbon intensity by 2030. We have a big plan for our renewable scale up. It was, I remember 5 years back, we were involved in that 100 gigawatt and people used to imagine whether India can reach 100 gigawatt. Then we went to 175 and now we hear it is 500 gigawatt by 2030, all because the technology and the cost of that technology was quite affordable, because significant amount of that cost gets passed on to consumers, and being a low income country, which is we're only becoming a middle income country in the next 3 to 4 years, there's a huge pressure on cost and the affordability at that. So therefore, now that renewable is affordable, I think we are seeing the scale up quite possible there. The second, I think the question is whether technology can drive sustainability. I don't think that's anymore a question. Technology will drive sustainability for sure, but how do we manage this transition? How do we finance this transition? How do we have people who can manage this transition? That becomes quite an important question as we go forward. So in the discussion, the questions would be around 4 broad elements. Right? First is how technology development would support some of our sectors in the net zero. That's one. And just to at a overall level, we are talking about 50 billion tons of carbon emission every year. Now, if I use Bill Gates' way of segregating this carbon emission, 31% comes by making things like steel, cement, and aluminum. 27% of it comes from producing things, which is 19% comes from transportation, moving things, right? And 16% from growing things, be it our agriculture, meat industry, and 7% from heating and cooling. Now we have, over the last at least 5-6 years, we've heard about technologies, right from managing the energy efficiency or the whole shift from molecules to electrons, right? Which means that a lot of studies which say that can we move from an oil and gas intensive economies to an electronic economy. That's one. Second, we're talking about energy mix transition, be it some of the latest technologies of storage, hydrogen, carbon capture, utilization and storage, end use sector electrification and bioenergy, right? So therefore, some of those technologies and whether they are cost competitive now is something we'll hear from our panelists. The second element is also, while a lot of talk is happening around the environment, water, plastic waste, we also believe technology can play a big role in upping corporate governance by enabling better data management and traceability. And also on the social agenda by providing skills, financial and health inclusion to communities, employees. Right? So therefore, that's the second element we want to bring it to life. The third element is about matured and emerging technology solutions. With so much of uncertainty, which technology to bet on and how do we finance that? That would be the third element of discussion. And then what is the kind of support that we would require from the ecosystem, policy makers, regulators, financial markets? So that's the fourth element that we'll speak to. So with that, let me dive into the questions. And the first question would go to Anindya. Anindya, Shell has been a traditional energy company. And I hear from your designation that you are energy transitions guy out there in Shell. So what's happening there? And you have declared a goal for net zero by 2050. What kind of technologies are you betting on? How are you going about this transition in India?
And thanks, Sam, for the question, and also inviting Shell to this panel. Greetings to you and every other eminent panelists on stage, and also the participating audience. You're right. Shell is a traditional company. We have been an oil and gas company for over 100 years, and we have been largely we take great pride in being a technology-led company, and we have several industry firsts to our credit. And we expect to leverage this technological prowess to navigate the challenges of the energy transition. So let me just break down for you what we are targeting to do in the next several years, and also to sort of state here that we have been increasing our ambition in step with what society wants us to do, as is coming out from the IPCC report and sort of global targets that are being set for net zero by 2050. So in October 2021, we set a target to reduce absolute emissions by 50% by 2030 compared to our 2016 levels on a net basis. Now, this covers all emissions in Scope 1, which will come directly from our operations, and in Scope 2, from the energy we buy to run our operations that are under our operational control. This complements our targets to reduce the carbon intensity, which we call the net carbon footprint, of the energy products we sell as well, which is sort of step 3, Scope 3, in step with society. This includes short-term targets. I will not get into those details at this point in time. Just to sort of embed this culture of decarbonization, and I sort of liken it to what we have seen in the past several years, how safety was sort of driven into the hearts and minds of the company and every employee. I'm seeing the same thing happening with energy transition right now. We have linked the pay of more than 16,500 staff to the target to reduce carbon intensity of our energy products by 6 to 8% by 2023 as compared to 2016. We believe that our annual oil production has peaked in 2019, and we expect our total oil production to decline by 1 to 2% a year until 2030. We are investing around $1 billion every year in low carbon energy, such as charging for electrical vehicles, hydrogen, biofuels, and electricity generated by wind and solar power. We plan on increasing that to around $2 billion, provided we can find the right commercial opportunities. We seek to have access to an additional 25 million tons of carbon capture and storage (CCS) capacity by 2035, equal to 25 CCS facilities that the size of the Quest project that we have in Canada. You mentioned the point about carbon removals, and I think this is something that we think is going to be a key technology that will be required in the coming years, because not all emissions can be avoided. By 2025, we will end a routine flaring of gas, which generates carbon emissions from the upstream assets that we operate. By 2025, we expect to have kept the methane emissions intensity of Shell-operated assets to below 0.2%. Now, as you can see that for doing so many of these things, a lot of technology solutions will have to be developed or even invented. And we believe that this will benefit not only our company and our industry, but we can extend this to other industries as well. But we can talk more about that later. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anindya, for your comments on that. So let me then welcome Sandeep. I think we missed you in the first part. So you come in, and that question is directly to you now. You are another sector which is bearing the brunt of transition pressures, right? Be it around your power purchase, be it around modernization of your network, and be it managing the consumer demand. I would say 3 big aspects where you are facing the transition pressure. Because in India, the existing regulatory and contractual frameworks makes, I think, did we again lose Sandeep? I think so. Yeah. So I think by the time Sandeep joins, Suman, I will have to come to you. So yes, we have heard the efforts of Shell in actually making that transition from a oil and gas major and the reduction path that they have undertaken. So what about, so Mahindra in 2018 actually took on these goals of net zero by 2040, right? So how are you transitioning your businesses and investments, be it from your ICE engines to EV? Keen to understand how you are managing the policy landscape, which is continuously evolving around that, and the businesses and the bet that you're making on certain technologies going forward. Given that you already have existing investments which may be only recent in nature. So, Suman, over to you. So, Sandeep, can you hear us? Because after Suman, I'll go back to you.
Yeah. I can hear you. I've been struggling with my connectivity here. But yeah, I think
Sure.
I've got it in order now. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No worries. So, Suman, you can go next. I think after that, Sandeep can come in, please.
Sure. Thanks, Sambitosh. So Mahindra, as you know, it has been always pioneering how to make its businesses climate friendly. We have a very high focus on energy efficiency. So just to give you an example, a vehicle today is made with almost 65% less energy than it was 8 years ago, just in the consumption, a regular ICE. Then we make engines at Chakan, and that itself has doubled energy productivity in 4 years. We had said it will take 25 years. We are adopting renewable energy at scale. We are already moving to, towards a zero waste to landfill organization. We are making locations water secure. There are 2 factories that don't take water for 200 days in a year from the municipality. And beyond that, and that's where sort of our businesses come in, is we have businesses such as electric vehicles, shared mobility, green buildings, solar energy, waste to energy, auto recycling, micro irrigation, all of these, which are climate friendly businesses for the future. So at a group level, Mahindra Group is indeed defined ESG as one of its big priorities and working towards delivering its commitments. But let me talk a little bit about the topic for which I am here, which is the electric mobility. The first thing I want to say is EV as a technology, electric vehicles as a technology solution, it really offers significant emission benefits if you compare it with a traditional ICE vehicle. Normally we say, oh, you're replacing the tailpipe with the with the fossil fuel generated electricity, so it's not actually benefiting, but almost all the analysis of the reports that have been developed to date show that if you take a medium-sized battery electric vehicle in India, life cycle emissions are lower by almost 20 to 30%. And we expect that as the electricity mix in the future changes away from coal, that will reach almost 60% lower emissions. Also, the other part which we say, okay, if you have EV, it is going to cause large increases in power demand. Some analysis has been done which shows maybe it will be only 1% higher power demand, not as much as we are thinking. So the overall basis, I think EV as a technology is offering significant emission benefits. But now when you talk about the technology and the investments associated with the EV technology, as some of you might know, lithium-ion batteries are the predominant technology used today. And we expect it to at least be the dominant technology for at least 3 to 5 years. There are a few kinds of this lithium-ion technology. There's LFP, there's NMC, there's NCA. And how we determine where we'll invest is, really fit for application. All my vehicles, which is a 3-wheeler in the last mile mobilities, are using LFPs, for example, because that is where the commercial or the total cost of ownership value proposition works out. So you have to look at the application and then choose the technology. But we do know that a lot of research is going on to improve the energy density, and which will therefore reduce the raw material consumption and overall also reduce cost. The big disruption we are looking for forward to is the solid state batteries. Maybe it will be coming closer to 2030. We don't know yet, but that will be a huge disruption. Fuel cells and green hydrogen, that is again another topic that is hugely in discussions because that's the application that can be used for the large distance transportation like your trains or your bigger commercial vehicles. So that is yet again, work is going on. Companies are developing the technology, but it's going to take a little bit of time. In India, what is happening in terms of adoption, if you see the other side of the picture, there are 2 categories which have reached a total cost of ownership value prop, which is the 2-wheelers and the 3-wheelers. And that is why you always see 2-wheeler EV and 3-wheeler EV in the news almost every other day. We are expecting that at least in the category that I have products in, which is electric 3-wheelers, today it's around 7 to 10% penetration, and it should reach about 30% in 2025. And 4-wheeler inflection may be a little bit further away. So the other thing I would say is, the there is going to be significant reduction in the battery technology. And when that happens, this will drive further uptick. It's a both side. It's not just a supply side or an investment side. The customer actually must buy the product as well. So as we are seeing the cost curve of the cells coming down, we should expect that there will be significant adoption, maybe 5 to 6 years from now, in the larger vehicle categories. In the smaller ones, the TCO is already here. So I guess there is certain uncertainty, but when we are in the particular industry, you can evaluate the technology and make your adjusted bets. As I said, four-wheelers are at a very nascent state of adoption, and at least I can tell you, for the next 10 years, we are going to see both diesel and EV vehicles coexisting. So the investments are being made accordingly, really.
So thanks. So we'll come back to Sandeep. So now that the vehicles are ready, is your network ready, Sandeep? So there I had a question to you. I think Tata Power is also facing a lot of transition pressure, right? On all the three fronts, be it on sourcing of your power, upgrading of your network, or your consumers becoming prosumers now, right? Because most of them would also be producing energy. And we have the regulated sector, which means that any investment that you do has to be passed on to consumers, and there is an affordability given the state of our country, demographics, GDP and all. So how do you manage the transition pressure, along with which, for example, you are creating new value pools, like when you are putting up a charging infrastructure or a home automation kind of a thing. So how are you looking at this transition? And I was also sharing with the panel and audience how Mr. Sinha, Tata Power had announced a 2050 net zero goal. I think he has advanced it by 5 years to 2045, right? So therefore, any views around that? Sandeep, over to you.
Yeah, hi, first of all, thank you for getting me on this distinguished panel amongst all the wonderful people here. Well, I think I will not have a view on what my CEO has said. I just have to do it. Okay, so that makes it, that's very clear. And he is well within his rights to increase the target even further. But having said that, I think the kind of things that we as a company are doing, we as a verticals are doing, give him the confidence that this is doable, very much doable, and this is the change that is being driven right from the top, obviously. So the proportion of power generated from renewable, clean and thermal sources is shifting very, very fast, as you can see. In India, in Tata Power, very strongly. And Tata Power is not the same company that it used to be 105 years back when it started. In the last maybe a decade or so, there is a lot more than what generation, transmission, distribution that we do as a company. For example, we are into renewable big time, the largest renewable contracting, microgrids, then battery storage solutions, solar pumps, the solar rooftops, electric vehicle charging, and we are by far the leader by a mile in all of those. All of these new streams. So we are actually now having a customer touch point of more than just switch on and switch off of power. The customer buys a electric vehicle, we are tapping him through the electric charging point. He buys a home automation solution, we are touching him through the home automation solution. So the touch points to a discom like ours have increased significantly, and that's, I think, giving us an additional responsibility as to how do we make the entire downstream from the generation energy management, which is an ESCO vertical. We get into the customer's premises and with the promise that we will reduce your power consumption by so and so. Now this actually comes in the face of this entire business proposition. Why would somebody who wants to sell electrons go as a separate unit and say that, look, I want to reduce the consumption? But I think this is where the sustainability and responsibility angle of the organization is. Now, coming to the electric mobility part of the story, I think we have taken a head start on the electric mobility front here. We are currently at about 1,250 odd public charging stations. This does not include the home chargers that we've installed for about 7,000-8,000 households when they have bought the cars. These public chargers are across destination chargers at offices, malls, shopping complex, cinemas, and right up to the highways, in which our partnerships with the oil companies is really, really helpful. So that's the kind of things that we are driving. The plan is to go to about 2000 in about 2025. We want to go to about 10,000 stations, which also is likely to be significantly enhanced. We want to actually tackle the problem of chicken versus the egg. So when Sumanji's company makes vehicles, we'll be very happy to charge them. We are waiting for them to charge, and so the chicken and egg problem we're trying to solve ahead of time, and this is exactly what we believe. There was an interesting study which suggested that the moment a customer sees a charger, he gets the confidence to say, "Oh, there is a charger. Now I can go and buy a vehicle." He may not necessarily use that charger at all, because he's 90% of the times he'll be using his home charger. But it's just a very psychological thing, and we are trying to sort of break that into a very logical thing. The business case is a long distance away, but I think when the business case arrives, we are right there to ring in it out. Yeah.
Sure. Now, Bill, I'll come to you. Many of them are talking about their own journeys, and you have been providing solutions to it, right? So, and across the value segments that I think Suman touched and Anindya touched. But how difficult is it to convince someone to procure these kind of technologies? Because as we also have reached out to our own clients, there's a lot of hesitation, because some of these technologies, though they come with what they call as a green premium, they look at it as a cost rather than looking at a lifespan of benefits or value creation kind of a lens, right? So therefore, what has been your journey? What are the technologies that you have? First, like if you can just articulate some of that, which is supporting these transitions. And second, how have been the consumer? Is there still an hesitation because only the best of ESG compliant companies seem to be taking solution from you, or is there a more socialized adoption of these kind of technologies? So over to you, Bill.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, all right, thanks for inviting me here, and good evening and hello to all the fellow panelists, and good evening to all the audience out there. So first of all, let me say that any company which has an ambition to achieve net zero, and if it's in any kind of business, it will be consuming heating, cooling, and water in the process of making or doing something, and then it will be creating some sort of waste. So Thermax is very uniquely positioned as providing the input utilities of heating, cooling, water, chemicals, steam, and then also handling the waste, which is wastewater and the waste heat that gets produced. So long before climate change became the topic of discussion almost 15 years back, the mission of the organization was to deliver sustainable solutions in the field of energy and environment. And we have been tracking our balance sheet as green and non-green. That is the amount of business that we do towards black business or generating using coal-based boilers or non-fossil based energy generation. So that's a little bit about what we do. In terms of technologies that we have currently, let me begin with that, because there's a whole lot of technologies that's very exciting and in the future. At the moment, what we are offering to all our customers who have already embarked on the journey to net zero is a direct reduction in their CO2 emissions by offering green energy in the form of biomass-based plants, in the form of solar energy. That's direct. But there's a whole lot of other activities that we are able to assist our customers with in terms of indirect energy savings, which also help them become greener and help them reduce their carbon footprint. To give you a couple of examples, let's say any cement plant produces clinker, and there is a lot of waste heat that is generated in a cement plant. Thermax delivers waste heat recovery boilers that can use this waste heat which has been in the past been just left out in the air, we take that input as a heat and generate electricity that suffices 30% of a cement plant. And as you know, electric consumption or the consumption of electricity is about 40% for a kg of clinker that is produced. So every cement plant, when it installs a waste heat recovery boiler supplied by Thermax, they reduce their electricity consumption by 30%, which in other times they would have procured from the grid, which is largely still fossil based. So this is one way that a cement plant can say that I'm going green. The other exciting technology around that is coming up is electric boilers itself. So today I can stitch together a solution where I can say that I can put up a 3 to 5 megawatt biomass based boiler, which is completely green. I can manage the supply chain of the biomass. The electricity generated from that, I can either give it directly or I can even feed it to an electric boiler that can be used to generate hot water. So now I'm closing a complete loop. The other way we are helping customers is by reducing their water footprint. So almost all companies, as part of their net zero commitments, while we are talking about CO2 emissions, there is also a very major criteria there about becoming net water zero also. And Suman briefly touched about that two of their plants, consume nil or zero water for most part of the year. And the way that to do that is to recycle water. Again, when you recycle water, there is an energy consumption that goes into it. And today, with the basis of a solar power plant or a biomass-based power plant, I can help companies recycle water using green-based energy. So we are more and more closing the circular loop, as we are calling it. So that's a little bit about that, but there's a whole lot of exciting technologies around carbon capture, hydrogen, etc., that we can talk in the next phase of the discussion. So back to you, and thanks for the question.
Thanks, Bill, for this. So Rahul, coming back to you, I think most of the conversation till now has been around operational technologies and also focused around the environment part of it, right? So you are the one who stitches it all through, who integrates all this so that the management sees the dashboard where he can take certain decisions, be it on capital allocation, be it on how his sustainability measures are working on the ground. So over to you as how you look at the solutions, not only from the environment side, but how can you also facilitate empowering the communities, employees, or improving governance? I would want also those elements to be brought out. Yeah.
Thanks, Sam. Very good evening to all the panelists and the audience. We are, Sensoc is basically an early stage company, so we are very small compared to all the other organizations represented here on this panel. What we do essentially is, we built a cloud-based software platform for what we call asset lifecycle management. It's focused on solar, but can be extended to other other asset classes like interconnection, transmission lines, and so on. The idea is basically to enable creation of what we call a single source of truth for all asset data. When we look at, let's say, a solar PV power plant, and then help build effectively a digital twin of the solar asset. And what that allows you to do is essentially help optimize the performance of the power plant, extend and maximize the life cycle of that asset. So you get the most, I would say, impact from a clean energy or emissions reduction perspective for every dollar that you invest in the asset. So the key here is, ability to integrate data from multiple sources, right? So whether it's of course, the SCADA system that's tracking, monitoring generation from the power plants, or new emerging sensing platforms that you have, for example, drones. Or any other sensor, right? Tomorrow you might have a robotic rover going around the plant, maybe doing some measurements or characterizing a few things, doing some investigation. You should be able to write an application and plug it into a central platform where it's just feeding everything in and capturing that data in a structured way, so that it helps build the digital twin, right? So that's what we are creating at Sensoc. And this is crucial in our opinion. I mean, it's not core product technology. So If you look at what solar PV or battery technologies, etc., are talking about, that is the first step at a technology level, creating these solutions, and then you need software essentially to be able to stitch this together and manage this entire ecosystem efficiently, right? Both at an individual unit level or the asset level, as well as between assets, basically talking and optimizing the interaction between these assets. So that's what we are focusing on essentially. And once you have data, which is key, and that's sitting on the cloud, you can then start mining that, analyzing that, using ML algorithms and generating insights that they can use for day-to-day decision making that can be automated, in the sense that if you are advanced enough, you could have grid components that are talking to each other and making some decisions in terms of how power should go to whom, and that's where you have these concepts of virtual power plants and so on that are emerging now, where you have a network of distributed energy assets that the VPP effectively it's a cloud-based distributed software essentially that's optimizing and managing the contribution of those set of assets or resources to the overall grid. So it's at one level you have that, and then of course you have the asset level software like what we are building that helps you manage your asset better and manage the interaction of that asset with other systems. So we believe that's obviously there's a lot of software out there, and there are many startups like ours working on different pieces of this puzzle, and this is what will come together. Essentially, the analogy can be given to what the transition of in the computer world, right, and in the industry, where you had mainframes and largely centralized computing to distributed computing on the internet, and you had this complete glue layer of the internet, right, that was developed to manage this. I think that's pretty much what is happening with the energy infrastructure, where it's becoming more and more distributed, and not just generation but also consumption points are increasing. I mean, of course, you have adding other consumption units like electric charging systems, and those cars also can potentially be contribute back, right? If they have excess energy, they're plugged in, you could even imagine them contributing back to the grid. So you need software to manage all of this, and that's where I think technology will play a crucial role in enabling and supporting this transition.
Sure. And Rahul, it's quite contextual because many discussions in the new paradigm of ESG is all about capturing data, and these are all non-financial data, right? And top 1,000 companies by market cap anyway have to report it voluntarily this year, mandatorily next year onwards. There has to be a trust ecosystem built around it. Today, a lot of acquisitions come on greenwashing and putting out something which cannot be verified or measured. So some of these platforms do play a role in at least ensuring the trust equation between the stakeholders go up, and then the management is also doing the right things in front of all the stakeholders. So thanks Rahul for this. So Anindya, I'll come back to you. You talked about what Shell was doing for itself, right? So we have also heard about Shell investing in R&D technologies to ensure that transitions of some of the hard to abate sectors, be it cement, steel, aluminium, is supported. So some time back, we've also heard of entities like IKEA supporting their tier 1 suppliers with clean investments that they do for their suppliers in transitioning. So this is becoming quite interesting now. So please do share what Shell is doing around that.
Thanks, Sam. And first of all, I must compliment the other speakers for their brilliant interventions. I think I learned a lot from their remarks. So you're right, my earlier remarks covered mainly our scope 1 and 2 emissions, but we recognize that these emissions represent only 15% of the overall emissions. So most of the emissions come from our products being used by our customers. And we're not sort of saying that we want to be a net zero emissions company by 2050. We say we are trying to be a net zero emissions business by 2050, which means that we would like to also cover our products in that sort of envelope. And therefore, we have to look at the sectors in which we operate. There are some traditional sectors we operate in, and there are some new sectors. And we have actually created a new business called sectoral decarbonization, which goes deep into these sectors. So the traditional sectors were transport, industry, and power generation sectors. And in these sectors, deep electrification with renewable electricity or use of bioenergy could target the low-hanging fruits. But the significant challenges come in the hard-to-abate sectors, as you rightly pointed out. Let's look at aviation, for example. I mean, aviation is going to be difficult. It needs a high-density fuel. So sustainable aviation fuels is being pursued using biofuels, and also synthetic kerosene, which is essentially using captured carbon and green hydrogen. In fact, Shell responded to a Dutch government challenge on this and provided a consignment of such synthetic kerosene within 3 months, which was used on a KLM flight from Amsterdam to Madrid. Shipping is the other sort of global industry, and to decarbonize shipping, one needs to work with the entire ecosystem and across the globe. What is being considered as the future bunkering fuels is methanol from captured carbon and green hydrogen, again ammonia from green hydrogen. But in the interim, maybe LNG has a role to provide a decarbonization solution. Heavy duty trucking is an area that again needs energy dense fuels, and right now LNG and biofuel blends are interim solutions, but before the technology for hydrogen for fuel cell electric vehicle trucks or even battery electrical trucks become viable. But you brought out an interesting element, which is the sort of non-traditional sectors that we have traditionally not been there, because steel, cement, aluminium, etc. They primarily use a lot of coal, and Shell had a coal business till the late 90s, and we exited the coal business. So we don't supply coal to these companies. But their quest for decarbonization opens up new opportunities to not only offer them fuels of low carbon intensity, as was mentioned earlier, but also technology solutions, including a digital backbone for a system-wide optimization on the lines that Rahul actually articulated so well. Afraid I will not be able to divulge too much around the R&D and the commercial models, but suffice to say that we have teams working feverishly on both the technology and commercial bits of this jigsaw.
Sure.
So I'll pause here. Thank you.
So Suman, I'll delve into your earlier avatar as a consultant, right? So in your previous avatar, you were a consultant before you dwelled into pharma and automobiles. So as I'm hearing these technologies and a lot of names are getting dropped, technologies getting evaluated, if I am a CEO of a company where I have to make a bet on should I bet that India will electrify everything, or should hydrogen will still be relevant? How do I place my bets? Is it always an alternate that I have to weigh, and where do I invest? Because sometimes it's like for a layman, I think Sandeep can say whether I'm going right, but somebody investing in a CDMA technology completely went bankrupt, right? While somebody investing in a GSM, if that's a right analogy. But how do you make these bets? And you are on cusp of some of these bets, Suman. So.
Isn't it $1 million question? I wish I had the crystal ball and I could give you the magical answer. But it is a very risk-weighted answer, right? So in our business, for example, you have to always look at cell technology. It is evolving so fast. So, I can just tell you, any day you open, there's a new startup with a new technology which they claim is giving better efficiency than all other technologies in the past. So when we take a bet, of course, because we have to use it on vehicles and they actually need to work and we need to sell them, we are doing it in two ways, right? One is, of course, the dominant technology, where we see there is a supply chain established, there is a value chain, there is ability to establish, let's say, resale value for our vehicles. We go with the dominant technology, which for us is really lithium ion right now. It's going to be there for a few years. But we keep our eyes open on the solid state. We keep our eyes open and do some pilots on the metal layer technologies. aluminum air or some other technology. We'll do some pilots. We'll check it out. I think also, we have to look beyond technology. Technology is only one part of the solution. Like, I'll just give you an example in my space right now, because I was a consultant 10 plus years ago, and I'm not going to give you a lot of inputs about that time. But if you look at my space, right, or let's say this electric mobility, technology you can choose, but technology adoption is a function of so much more than just the battery technology. I have to look at the entire ecosystem. So, for example, I'll just tell you, a battery has 80% of its life left after the primary use in electric vehicles. If I just looked at technology and said, okay, this thing will last so long, and therefore we should just choose the longest living technology, that would be a little... it'll be a misstep, right? I need to look at the end of life, right? In between, I must look at second life. I must look at which of these technologies are better suited for second life applications. Is there an ecosystem to give you a second life? Is there a storage? So it can be. Then OEMs are also looking into this. This will be solved through partnerships, but I need to see that is the ecosystem evolving for this particular choice of technology to give the second life? Is there an end of life, or everyone is just going to burn the batteries at the end of life? If people are going to burn the battery, what was the point of shifting to this, right? So we need to invest in that aspect of it as well, recycling and post-useful life. There are only like 100 recycling companies now in the world. We have to figure out which is the technology of recycling that has to be scaled up. So I just think, like someone mentioned, circular economy, a technology choice in itself is just one of the few choices we have to make. In the context of the country or the application that we're using, we need to look at sort of the various value chain aspects and then choose what makes the most economic sense. And as some wise person said, don't make a hole so big that you can't recover from it from your P&L. So you have to take the measured bets. You have to take a risk-adjusted bet. So, you have to take bets, and you will win some and lose some. That is nature of business. But I think just look beyond. We cannot just look at technology. I need to look at the full value chain and to figure out which one is going to get adopted in the country and in the application that I have, and then make bet against that. But I'm sure you will discuss capital subsequently. So it's all about where the money flows is, isn't it?
Correct. And Bill, so over to you. I have been, I think, recently read your CEO making a comment that how you are putting skin in the game in a technology, and then going and even exposing equity exposure to some of those projects. So, any thoughts? Yeah, please do share how that's been handled.
So a couple of years back, as I said, as we started exploring that we want our balance sheet to look more and more green, one of the initiatives we started was a build, own, operate model under the separate subsidiary, which is named as Thermax On-Site Energy Solutions Limited. And what basically TOSL does is that if you are a customer who wants green energy, we can set up a complete. We supply the boiler, we manage the supply chain, and we deliver hot water or steam to your process needs. And we own and operate that asset for 5, 10, 15 years. So basically, we are now completely not only giving you green energy, but it's like you're taking away the whole headache of managing utilities away from you. And Thermax invests into those assets, and then we can give you steam per kg, or we even treat water similarly. So there are several customers with whom we have a 15-year agreement where we treat their entire water requirements for their entire plant, city, manufacturing unit. And we have a build and operate model around that. So that's TOSL, where we can give you steam, hot water, clean water on a per pay use basis, where Thermax owns the asset and we put in our equity in it. And as this business model develops, I'm sure at some point of time, if you want, we can take separate private equity investments also into that model. Continuing on my previous point, some other technologies that are developing right now, which are very exciting. Of course, one is the hydrogen, and there is gray hydrogen, there's blue hydrogen, there's green hydrogen, which I guess everyone's aware of. But it appears more and more that green hydrogen, as more and more companies start to pursue that, and the manufacturing of electrolyzers start to become at a much more larger mass scale, the costs of green hydrogen will start to come down, and at some point of time shipping and trucking becomes viable, and at some point of time industries such as steel, refinery, petrochemicals and cement will become viable as well. So that's the one other interesting thing is fuel cells. I think Suman mentioned about that. Thermax has developed fuel cell technology which has been tested by the Indian Navy and has been successfully adopted by them. And then in terms of cooling, we do a lot of cooling requirements by using waste heat. So that's the other thing. I think Sam has dropped out, so we are left to ourselves, and maybe I should pass on them. Maybe we should just wait for him to join, because we do need a moderator.
I think they are almost out of time now.
Yeah.
And still have 10-15 minutes. Yeah.
Any time when we are talking technology lets us down. so yeah, I mean, that's the nature of this stuff when we look forward. So I was just hearing this about the CDMA versus GSM. I think, and coming from my background, I've been in telecom for a large part of my life. We use the technologies which enable the distribution side of the business. Really, from the customer's point of view, he does not care. As long as he gets power in his light, he does not care what technology is being used behind. And similarly, when I was in telecom, the customer who's really let's say an example of a watchman of the security guard, a security guard on your on the ground floor, he wants to watch a movie. Whether you do 3G, 4G, 5G technologies, he doesn't care. As long as he doesn't get that round box, I think that's what technology means to him. And yeah, good. Sambitosh, you're back. We were having a conversation while you were out.
No, I think it's good. Carry on with the conversation. So, Sandeep, the next question was to you.
To me.
For example, how are you managing the infrastructure from power to now carry with smart meters all the data analytics? Right, that's one. And second is, do you face an issue of stranded cost in your businesses? Because I also wanted you to think back on the telecom days that you had, and how you looked at it.
Yeah, so in fact, I was just giving the same telecom analogy in this context. See, from the customer's point of view, technology is just as good as what he gets to use his real user application. The example that I was giving when you joined in was that for a telecom customer, which is largely a typical example, a security guard who sits at the ground floor, for him, he just wants to watch a movie. He does not worry about 2G, 3G, 4G and all of that. People in the office keep worrying about technologies, and this is exactly the same thing. I think the word is similar when we go to even the power distribution or the power companies. For the customer, as long as you give him reliable quality power, that's all he cares about. And when you go to smart meters, these are all things which are enabling you to run your business more efficiently, not so much for the customer. Of course, the customer cares only if his life is becoming more informed. And when it's more informed, he can reduce his cost. His life is becoming more comfortable. His life is becoming more convenient, and the customer experience that you are able to deliver to him is making a difference. So to answer your question about the readiness on the grid, about are we ready for the grid and all that, and I think Suman touched upon this, 1%. I think that number is broadly about 4 to 5%. So if tomorrow all the vehicles that are out on the road become electric, then the load on the grid is just about 5 to 6%, which will be an increase. Now that 5 to 6% for a power company is all in a day's play. It just, there is a peak and trough that you see on a daily basis. That's not a challenge. However, people like power companies will have to gear up when all these cars and scooters and three-wheelers come to charging at the same point. I think that's when there is some bit of an engineering required, which the people in my company and people in the power domain are very well equipped to handle. Of course, it's not going to be the same. They will have to deploy smart charging technologies, time of the day, dynamic charging, and those kind of things. And we are building platforms for that. For example, the platform that we have built for our EV charging
Sandeep,
has capabilities of that nature.
I think we have only 30 seconds. The last word goes to Rahul. I just wanted to understand what happens if technology goes rogue. Now that's one element. We have 30 seconds, so please do share about data privacy, cyber security, all those issues, Rahul.
It's absolutely, a very good question. It's a crucial issue, and especially as we start putting more and more out onto the cloud, this is a problem that everybody is going to face. So cybersecurity will, increasingly continue to play. It's already become critical and crucial, but will continue to play a very large role, because when you have critical systems like power infrastructure, where if it goes down, if the web goes down, it is frustrating right now, but it still can go on with your life for at least a little while. But if the power goes down, and that's subject to cyber attacks, you can have serious issues. So I think standards, cybersecurity, company solutions, I think all of that will become increasingly critical in the new ecosystem.
Sure. So with this, I think we will close the panel. As I summarize the view of the panelist, I take back actually 5 things. First, transition journey contains considerable uncertainties, such as the extent of electrification or use of hydrogen in modes of transfer. So key will be to build out scenario-based planning. I think that's what came out from Suman's thing. We need to raise awareness of the technology landscape available, because even with the best of companies, sometimes when we go in touch and connect with them, they don't understand the technology landscape. That's the second one. Initiate pilots and have commitment to scale up. The third is about allocate resources dynamically to the technology which is emerging or reaches cost parity. The fourth is to build a larger alliance ecosystem to spread the outcome stories and to leverage markets for financing. And the last one is we should also ensure technology is sustainable and utilize technology to become more sustainable. And we must do that in a responsible manner, building in proper governance, respecting privacy, and building trust. Thank you all for your participation. Hope you found the conversation useful. Let's stay responsible and stay connected. Thank you all.